we will go ahead and, as Talise mentioned, with the advances in our technology and data collecting and those kinds of things, square footage may not be something that is used as much anymore, but there are times when you want to use it. So we'll go ahead and spend a few minutes here. So on an allocation based on square footage, this is something that is more attributable to the lab or the space. And we want to break it down based upon what activities are happening in that space based upon the square footage. So in this example, we have student assistant salaries. We want to allocate them based on the square footage of 2 laboratories. So a student is paid a salary of $1,200 a month to clean glassware in 2 laboratories conducting similar research. The only research performed in Lab A is on Award A. That's convenient. I love it. And the only research performed in Lab B is on Award B. So in this example, the square footage of the laboratories could be used as a reasonable basis to allocate the student's salary. So we could look at the square footage then, knowing that Lab A is 1,400 square feet and Lab B is 1,000 square feet. Then you have that math there and that pans out. Again, we're seeing less and less of this for use on sponsored awards, where I see it most frequently in use in the roles that I've had is when we're actually allocating on non-sponsored projects for facility-based costs. So utilities may be based on square footage, or the amount of custodial charges for that building could be based on square footage. So it is still in use, but again, seeing that less and less on sponsored awards. But it is a viable method, and as long as it's documented well and makes reasonable sense for the type of cost, that is also an option for you.
If I can add something into this
Please do.
it still is, yes, it's viable, but unless you have someone who has only research doing in lab A and only research in lab B is on award B, this is it can be an extremely complicated calculation. Um, if there's different research being done, I know bench space is at a premium at a lot of universities these days. And not only do you maybe have 2 projects, but you might have 2 different PIs sharing bench space in a research lab. So your lab might be 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 people spread along a couple of benches. This type of calculation for a smaller research operation might be something that you could still use these days, but for the majority of researchers, this is not a practical situation. As Carrie said, it's something that it's allowable. You're allowed to calculate like this. The government will accept it, but buyer beware if you decide to actually use allocation based on square footage, because it's going to get complicated very quickly.
Yes, and the other thing that we've noticed is take into consideration the amount of effort of various administrators it might take to be in control of how many projects are coming online in a given month, how many are going offline in a given month, how many are out of lab work phase and have moved into data processing phase, and that again, it is a tremendous amount of work in a busy lab or a busy building or that kind of situation. And so definitely, I think this brings to point very well, thank you, Anne, that you want to pick the most reasonable and accurate measurement of the usage or square footage or FTE, whichever method is the most reasonable and accurate to identify the cost to the project, because we want those to be as fair as possible in our allocation.
Yes, and I would add one more thing to this too. The reason why we don't find a lot of big, large institutions, research institutions using this format is because we now have faculty members who now have an office in their lab. So you have offices that are dedicated to a manager, can be dedicated to PI, And so that's actually, there's the lab, and then inside that lab, they have office space. So that's really, really, really hard, right? For the person who's in charge of calculating that FNA and getting that rate for the institution, this is why it's normally not used. And again, in smaller institutions, though, as Carrie mentioned, it could be found, just like Ann said. Again, you have to take into account, do you have people working in there doing administrative work? Because if there's someone in there and it's assigned a little desk and auditors can go and see that, okay, well, really, this is not all research square footage space. And so you could be technically not on your own, but unwittingly going, okay, I'm not really charging the correct FNA because there's a person who has a desk who's a postdoc working in there, and that's administrative costs. So this is why we really try not to use this. But again, it could be used, but take into account how much of the space is actually being used for research, and do you have anybody in there with an office who's actually doing administrative work?